Hari Om. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. As we reach the concluding session of the 3-day intellectual discourse, the panel discussion on the topic culture as envisioned by Puja Gurudev, I think it holds most significant at this juncture. Over the past 3 days, we have reflected on 5 different but actually interconnected dimensions of Puja Gurudev's vision, that is philosophy, spirituality, education, society, and patriotism. We could see actually culture emerging as a natural culmination of all these dimensions, if I'm not wrong. Gurudev would say a living expression. And Gurudev has beautifully reminded us, man's control of external nature is called civilization. His control of internal nature is called culture. So, on that note, let us continue and deepen this conversation on culture with our distinguished panelist. Without further delay, I think I will extend the first question to Chaitra ji. With your work integrating scientific rigor and Indian traditions, I think this question aptly suits you. Puja Gurudev often spoke about culture as an expression of inner refinement. So, how did Gurudev interpret culture as a living, evolving expression of spiritual values rather than ritual preservation alone?
Thank you. This is actually quite a loaded question to answer, but it's a very interesting question. When this question came to me, it made me to go back and almost exhaust the kind of publication that Chinmaya's, and Gurudev's wherever video glimpse and the commentaries that had to be looking. But before getting into this question, I thank Chinmaya institution to get me here. I have been wanting to come here for quite a long time, and I think Gurudev created an occasion. So probably he has this decision, when should I come and when should I not. So I got it, and thanks to Gauriji for making this happen. So if you read the description of culture, there are 2 different contexts with which Gurudev would use the word culture in his writings. One is a general sense of the word culture, and the other one is about Indian culture. So there are different kinds of things that he explains. And if you want to do a literary analysis of how many number of times he has used the word culture, and every time he has used what he was meaning, probably it would lead to a lot of contradictions and misleading understanding of it. But if you actually look at each of his writing, it looks like there is one Ekasutra when he was referring to. He's trying to articulate it. Probably because he's saying it in English, he had to use it in different kind of expressions to articulate it. And I would try to make an attempt on how I understand the Gurudev's attempt as a single coherent whole, in the way that the statement that it is a living and evolving expression of a spiritual value, and why the spiritual value is a very central idea to link to the culture is something that I would like to articulate. Now, if you look at the word culture, in the Gurudev's writings, you have an Indian culture, a contradistinction with the Western culture. This is what is an underlying kind of theme that runs. And he constantly keeps showing that there is difference between these 2 cultures. Even though he gives some definitions, but largely the description of culture comes from the differences that exist between 2 cultures is what is really, he formulates. But then it doesn't get articulated in words in saying what exactly this culture really is about. So I would like to employ my understanding of how we look at culture. Now, if you look at, so Ramakrishnananji in the previous slide, he showed about the fragrance, over a period of long period in time, that in a geographical area, certain community would express, etc. If you put all of them together, even though there is reference to value, etc. But I think the deeper emphasis that Gurudev was pointing to was about an ability to learn and teach something, he most often uses the word culture in the sense of cultivating, something. Now, that is the core meaning with which he works. Now, if you look from that point of view, that over a period of time, if values are being transmitted, getting expressed as fragrance, that then one must interpret it as saying that there must have been a standardized teaching learning process, within the communities in a geographical area. Now, if you say culture is about learning something, and now what is that needs to be learned? And if there are two cultures which are different from each other, what is that which is making the difference? And what makes Indian culture so fascinating? That he would articulate, which I completely in sync with, is to say that this would become the way, a leading light to the world. Now, if you see from this point of view, it appears that the way in which we go about the world, the way we learn in this world, in India, seem to be radically different from other part of the world. So technically speaking, using our rational mind, it appears that every human being is capable of learning every possible way. Because learning is human species property, and this cannot be different to one place or the other. But if you actually look at the way we connect with people, we resonate with people, we think about issues in the world. Now, you see that there are significant difference in Western cultures and Indian culture, the way you connect. So when my collaborators come and stay in my house for weeks, we actually get into tensions because our ways of understanding human beings are slightly different. So even though every human being is potentially capable of learning every possible way, because of our surrounding socialization, we seem to be learning certain ways of being. Now, one way is to say that in this statement, the ritual offers one model for Indians to sort of go about and look at. Our Shraddha, our initiation into Dhyana, our initiation into the world of Devata, initiation into any text that we study, whether it is Gita. Now, everything that we have, in my own childhood, for example, for us reading Ramayana is a Saptaha. Now, after reading Ramayana, then you have Arati, Prasada. So, the whole process that goes in. So, there is a way in which we use ritual. And this is something very evident in Gurudev's writing. In saying ritual, he doesn't deny ritual. Now, he says that why we should do ritual and how we should engage with ritual. And if you don't really focus on why is that we are using some way of acting in this world, it is basically at some point in time, it is not yielding anything. In that sense, if you see culture as a way of learning, and therefore it is also a system of teaching. Now, it appears that Indians have a very practical way of transmitting, and ritual becomes a means of transmitting that practical knowledge. Because Vedanta, though you learn text, everything, some guru has to guide you. You have to be dealt with the experiences and you have to be contained in it. On the contrary, in European culture, it doesn't work in this way. Now, they work in a different way than the way that we work. So, in our research, for example, we make the distinction between the performative versus theoretical. Now, it appears, if I read more and more Gurudev's work, it appears that he is referring to the performativity, doing things. That's why Mahadevanji's famous quote that I have caught once, that our texts seem to be saying all the theoretical, but the processes are not there in our books. Now, if you want to get that process, where do you get it? You get it in parampara. Now, ritual becomes a very important vehicle of transmission of this practical knowledge. Once you get that, probably you link with your text and you relook at it. So, in that sense, now both the cultures look at how do we live in this world, how do I understand oneself. Now, the way Indians have thought about it seem to be extremely complex and sophisticated. Therefore, the kind of diversity that he was referring to is possible because people from all kinds of background, different times, you can go back. So we can go back to our textual traditions to say what is the goal and purposes to which we have to exist. But then you make amendments depending upon your parampara, your times, etc. And ritual becomes important. But so there is this dichotomy that a lot of people are lost in rituals, which is the kind of worry that Gurudev keep repeatedly saying. But some people told me that Gurudev is not very favorable to ritual, but his writing doesn't point that way. In fact, his emphasis is more on how to look at ritual for a certain goal that every human being must be achieving. So in that sense, what is very fascinating to me is that if you want to talk about culture, the only way that we can talk about Indian culture vis-a-vis Western culture, by keeping learning and teaching central from the communities. So in that sense, it also makes me understand why he has built this organizational structure. He could have been happy being enlightened. There are so many people, he might have been one of those enlightened and he built it because there has to be a structured, systematic transmission of teaching, learning process. So that is what emerges in the statements of Gurudev. I think I took more time. I'll stop here. Yeah.
In fact, Gurudev has beautifully put it through knowing the why behind what. That is the most important when even if for culture also, knowing the why behind the what. I think that beautifully resonates with what Chaitra ji was trying to bring it here. From this foundational understanding, let us move to the institutions through which culture is sustained and transmitted. Puja Gurudev has always acclaimed that a temple is a society center and must become places of cultural revival. Shefali ji, given your deep engagement in Bharatiya art, heritage, and even temple architecture, could you elaborate on how he envisioned temples functioning not only as places of worship, but also as centers of learning, culture, and community life?
Hari Om, everybody. Before I go on to what temples were and what was Gurudev's idea of temples or how they should be, I would like to know from you, what do temples mean to you? When do you go to temples? Anybody can answer. Are there any students here? When do you go to the temples? Do you go just before the exams? You've not studied, but you still want 100% marks. So you go to the temple, you break a coconut and tell God, please, is baar samal lena. Give me 100% marks. You've not studied, but you're still asking for it. If you're an adult, you have a job interview, you go one day before the job interview, go to the temple, pray and say, God, please let me get this job. If you're unwell, you go to the temple and say, God, please, tomorrow is my medical test results, let it become normal. I will do this, I will, whatever. I'll break a coconut, I'll make a vow. So what we have turned temples into and what we have turned the divine into these days is a ATM machine. Anytime miracle. Right? That's why we go to the temples, right? We have forgotten what purpose temples served in Bharat over the years as a huge socio-cultural institution, which is what Swami Chinmayananda, Puja Gurudev was talking about. When Gurudev writes about temples, he uses a very interesting word. He says that temples regulated the rhythm of India's socio-cultural life. I love that word rhythm because it does not point at a very rigid hierarchy, it does not point at a compulsion, it does not point at a very autocratic system. What it says is that temples regulated the rhythm of India's economic life, of India's spiritual life, of India's social life, of India's cultural life, of India's artistic life. Even today, you go to any temple in your vicinity, even here, walk out of the campus for 5 minutes, go to the first temple you find. You will find that the temple is still a focus of community life at different points in time. Children will come to play at the temple. Elderly people will come in the evening and they will attend either a katha or they'll just gather together and chat. There will be commerce around temple. Even today, there will be a flower seller who has a stall outside and his or her earnings totally depend on the temple. Of course, the Archaka's earnings also depend on the temple. The temple has lands. There are people who are tilling those lands. They produce certain produce. Some of it they offer to the temple, some of it they keep themselves. There are temple musicians. Even today, particularly in Kerala and even in Tamil Nadu, there is a stage around the temple where many people offer seva. The Bharatanatyam dancers offer their Arangetram. Somebody organizes a Carnatic classical music performance. They're offering their seva in literature, in dance, in music, at the feet of the Lord. In that sense, they're still keeping the tradition that it is an important center for artistic excellence, even today. What has happened is that in urban Indian life, we have reduced our going to the temples, and we have reduced temples to ATM machines, anytime miracle machines. But this is not what Puja Gurudev was talking about when he was talking about temples. I will actually quote him. He says, temples served as holy halls of retreat for the masses. Their architecture provided an effective medium where the creative arts were fostered, and education for the cultural revival of the country was made available. He uses the past tense, but if you go to the villages of India and you go from anywhere, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and you observe the people, the community that the temple serves, you will realize that even today, the temple is the center of their socio-economic, their cultural, their artistic, their economic life, and that has not changed. But what we need to do now, especially in this context, and Swami Ramakrishnananji made a very, very eloquent presentation on that, we need to consciously bring back temples into our lives as institutions, particularly in urban India. That link is somewhere missing. So what happens is that the minute people get particularly English education and they move to a higher socio-economic level, they cut the cord with the temple and they'll start looking at a temple as, okay, whenever I need something, I'll just go to the temple. Or if I have a festival, I'll go to the temple. But the temple stops being a part of their everyday life. That is something that we need to change, and that is what Swami Chinmayananda had spoken about. Lastly, I'll end with another beautiful phrase that Gurudev ji has used for the temple. Way back in the 1990s, when he was talking about the importance of temples in people's lives, he had said that the temples are like a quote-unquote speed breaker for the pace of our everyday lives. I think it's a beautiful image, it's a beautiful analogy. And he said it in the 1990s. Now our lives are so much faster. Every day technology changes. You have to spend so much time in commuting. You have to spend so much time at work. Parents don't have time for children. Children don't have time for their studies and other classes. Life is just proceeding at a breakneck speed in most parts of this country. And we need to slow down that pace. For that, we need a speed breaker, and the temple is that speed breaker, because the temple makes you take a step back. The temple makes you realize that, okay, there is something more to life than just a career, than just education, than just the run behind money, status, more houses. In that sense, the temple tells you to slow down. It acts as a speed breaker, and that is what Swamiji meant when he described a temple as a speed breaker.
Thank you, ma'am. In fact, when you see Bharatanatyam, Mohiniyattam being offered as a ritual as well, see, the artistic performance, even that is also a cultural expression which is closely related to the temple. So in a way, the Indian arts, I think, that has always been designed to glorify God. So Gurudev even speaks about the reason why it was said so. He takes it in a way that the reason that he was telling about why arts is all about glorifying God, it is actually seen as a tool to refine the human mind, to uplift the human mind so that it will reach the infinite reality. So even being an artist, I have experienced that when it is seen as a sadhana. So beyond temples as well, I mean, so much of culture has been circulated and revolved around the temple as well, I think, ma'am. Thank you. So moving from institutions to lived cultural practices, festivals and traditions often become routine practices in modern life. Rameshji, from your perspective of inner growth and transformation, how did Chinmayananda Swamiji contributed to the revival of festivals and traditions as meaningful instruments of cultural education?
Thank you. So, one thing which we can see through all the sessions, there is a core principle which really comes out when Gurudev is talking about anything. The key to everything is really inner transformation. So if you think about inner transformation, we are talking about, say for example, if you talk about culture in this way, is that value, when it becomes virtue, it is through the mediation of culture that the value becomes a virtue. And that virtue is what? Virtue is expression of that value within the life of the individual. So when we are talking about outer expression of the value, it becomes a virtue, which means that value has been internalized through the process of various different learning, like you were saying, that it is a learning and a teaching. So what is it that is being learned that gives rise to this particular way of expression of the virtues within one's life? And if you put it within that broader context of that inner transformation, then we see that, all these things we've been talking about in terms of culture is that it is the mediation of the value to virtue, which is really the inner transformation. Now, if you put it within the broader context of really what are we talking about in terms of, culture and all the cultural expressions in our life, whether you talk about art or whether you talk about any kind of expression of that knowledge in any way, then we are talking about the way in which this can happen, the inner transformation. So the inner transformation is about what? And here, Pujya Guruji has written this book called Hindu Culture. And I would suggest that if you haven't read it, you read about it, Hindu culture. And he talks about Prakriti, Vikriti, Sanskriti. And what is this Sanskriti he's talking about? Is this inner transformation, which is really the virtue which is kind of going to be expressed in day-to-day life. And if we put it within another framework, we can see that where do we make our choices? In other words, how do we make our choices? What is the basis of making our choices? And if you look at the way in which, Gurudev often talks about meaning and purpose and values and choices and then behavior. So the outer behavior is not only connected to the inner choice, but it is also connected to values, and values are connected to purpose, and purpose is connected to meaning. Now if we think about what is the core meaning which we have been talking about throughout these last 3 days. What is the core meaning? We are talking about the essential nature of human being on the one hand, and we are talking about the transcendental nature of the human being. And therefore there is this kind of understanding that this way of inner transformation is the pathway towards understanding ourselves in its ultimate reality, so that we discover who we truly are. And Gurudev is talking very much about self-knowledge. And Upanishads, everything is talking about self-knowledge. And the self-knowledge is the ultimate knowledge. So what I'm saying is this inner transformation process, which we can see, sometimes I put it in this way. From Swabhav to Swadharma to Swarupa. Swabhav, what is your inner nature? And it could be anything. Before you get transformation, it is what you are. And this is what I was before I met Gurudev, all over the place. I was one of the hippies, right? Living in like a hippie. But when I met Gurudev, within 3 minutes, I was telling Chaitra that within 3 minutes, I knew this is my Guru. And that brought about such a transformation of my own swabhav. It didn't happen overnight. But there is a whole process I had to go through in terms of, doing the classes, reading, reflecting. Shravanam, Mananam was going on for years. And that made the inner transformation possible for me. So my ultimate aim, of course, is to recognize my Swarupa. But what I'm saying is that really the core principle which we are talking about, inner transformation, there are pathways towards inner transformation, and how do we then create this inner transformation in the most mundane way? How do we ground this transformation in such a way that it is connected with our day-to-day activities? Okay? And this is another model I use with my students. I tell them about the 4 A's. The 4 A's. Number 1, awareness. Be aware in the present moment, because past is past, future is yet to come. What is happening in the present moment? That is the gift you have been given. Your gift is this present moment. And it is in this present moment where the change is going to take place. And therefore, awareness, and then we go to alertness, that you become alert, something is going wrong. My thinking is going in the wrong direction. My feeling is going in the wrong direction. What should I do now? Become alert. Pay attention to what needs to be done. Immediately do it, which is awareness, alertness, attention, action. Now, if we see this kind of paradigm, it fits in very well with what is happening right now, and therefore festival, for example, is on the ground. And if you think about the 4 dimensions of human existence, physical, psychological, social, relational, and spiritual. And if you see, all these 4 dimensions are connected together in the process and the preparation of a festival. Right from preparation, we are thinking and doing something which is going to be paying attention to something in the moment. And that kind of way in which festivals are done, there is a whole process of preparation, and there is a process of engagement, and then there is a process of the outcome of that engagement and what it is going to do to you. And that outcome is really what we are looking at in terms of inner transformation. Okay? So festival is going to take care of all these 4 dimensions. Physical, imagine all the colors and all the music and all the dancing and everything else. That is connected to my sense of this physical dimension. Psychologically, something is happening. It is giving me so much pleasure in terms of connecting with this particular festival. And then at the relational level, it is a community festival. Everybody gets together and celebrates something together with that community spirit. In other words, the relational is also taken care of. And then finally, of course, the spiritual inner core meaning is there, right? So even when we talk about Diwali, what is the symbolism behind it? And this is what Gurudev has given us, a lot of understanding about what each festival is, what is the meaning behind each and every act within the festival, and how we can connect with it in such a way that it creates this inner transformation. And this is what I think is important to understand, is it is a process and a methodology of inner transformation, which is really grounded in our lived experience.
Beautifully articulated, Ramesh ji. Thank you so much. So, having explored the culture at personal and societal levels, let us now expand to a larger civilizational perspective. Continuing with you, Chaitra ji. Can Gurudev's work be understood as a part of broader world renaissance? And in what ways does this vision differ from dominant Western civilizational narratives? I think you have touched upon a bit in the beginning.
So this is I think a very, very important question. At least this answer to this question is there in different parts of Gurudev's writings. I mean, I don't think he would allow me to do any heavy lifting interpretation. I mean, he himself has articulated this, though not exactly in this question, but in his writing. Now, one easy way to look at, let's start with this idea of Renaissance. Today, Renaissance is a bad word. It's not a good word. Okay, and because if you look at the way Europe describes itself, the Renaissance, wherever. Now, it is bloodshed, violence, and it is destruction of diversity, destruction of traditions. Now, that is what Renaissance stands in Europe. So, obviously, we know when Gurudev is talking about the Renaissance, not just about India, but of the world, he is not really necessarily keeping anything, that has happened in the West. Let's be very clear about it. So, there are a lot of people are under this imagination that Renaissance is a very nice word, good word. That is not the case. Now, when Guruji is talking, so there is a fundamental contrast that emerges. See, if you look at societies in two parts, one is the cultures with religion and cultures with traditions. So you have three religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And then you have series of traditions which are available in the Eastern, specifically in India, if you contrast with them. Now, the route that those cultures with religion have taken is that their picture of Renaissance is about developing a particular kind of elite culture, developing a particular kind of infrastructure, huge building, and making their past as simply museum pieces. So the past getting delinked from the present, and past has no significant role to play, and progress is all about moving far away from what was there yesterday. Now, that is the kind of descriptions that you get the Renaissance in the Western world. And it is also reasonable to visualize that way, because for them, in all these three religions, individual cannot get happiness in this world. Now, you have to wait for another world. You have to have a journey. And is there any guarantee that you are going to, get union with God in the other world? There is no such guarantee, right? I will not get into the critique of what it is. It's another topic to be discussed. On the contrary, now our tradition, now in Advaita Parampara, which Gurudev sort of manifests in both action and his work, now the fundamental idea is that, Aham Brahmasmi. I mean, you yourself is Brahman. You move towards the path of realization. Therefore, it is the individual who is going to get knowledge. So there is this idea of community getting knowledge is not a feasible idea. Every time Nana comes to you, but then if you want to get it, you need to create necessary condition. Nobody is going to create necessary condition. You have to work for it and you get it. When you want to do that, you need to take the path of sadhana. So, which is what inner transformation, the kind of virtues that one has to, what takes you where. And even though our tradition says that every individual can his pathway to go to wherever he wants to go, all of us, spend time in being part of one parampara or the other. Now, so we keep emphasizing on Shraddha. Now, Shraddha, many people think it is a blind belief, etc. kind of thing. But for us, if whomever has has gone in that path and they have got what they are supposed to get, it is absolutely rational for me to follow that path because I know whomever has gone there has got it. Therefore, I go there, and Shraddha is the most rational thing that we have in our tradition. And once you have that, you actually creating an atmosphere where the world, everybody is individually engaging with this quest for pursuit of happiness. Now, there is an inner transformation which is a large-scale process. Now, what is very familiar to specific traditions within India, now Gurudev would want to have it as a process for the whole humankind. Why should somebody else not have access to it? Now, this is something that every individual must do. So, therefore, the model of Punaruthana, model for a person going towards Mukti, is the model that at the end of the day, this is exactly the model that the Gurudev is keeping for the transformed world that he sees. Therefore, in one sense, the Western paradigm of Renaissance, whether you talk about the best of the music, best of the architecture, best of the aestheticians, none of them are even closely matchable to what Gurudev is conceptualizing. He is not saying that you should not have infrastructure, etc. That's not his point. Now he is saying what is that which is actually allowing some individual to explore the best possible, way to live in this world, attain happiness, attain jnana. I mean, that is the ulterior goal. In that sense, there is no model that I know of in the Western tradition, which is conceptualizing Renaissance, comes even closer to anything that the Gurudev was referring to. But his vision, if at all you want to call that as Renaissance, I mean, that is the best model to have. But I mean, one of the corrections that I want to do, I mean, audience here are familiar with Gurudev's language, but Gurudev's language, now the things have changed in the world. The English language has different meanings now. So the Renaissance is not a good word today. So, I mean, if you want to take that, when I was a high school student, Renaissance was a good word. I mean, if you want to retain that word, what the model Gurudev is saying is something that not even comparable to remotely anything that exists in the Western world. So that is what we should keep in mind. And that is why I think the emphasis on Indian culture in the simplest possible language that the Gurudev has done is phenomenal.
Thank you, sir. I think we will move to the present day realities, I guess. Shefali ji, in today's context of modernity, globalization and increasing cultural homogenization, how do you think Pujya Gurudev's cultural vision addresses these challenges while actually preserving cultural rootedness?
Thank you. One of the things that I really appreciate about Swami Chinmayananda's writing is his sense of humor and his wit. So he says things in one sentence that would take other people like a 4,000 word thesis to talk about. So there's a sentence of his. He says that we live in a strange paradox. We live in an era where our comforts are increasing, but our happiness is decreasing. Which is very true, come to think of it. All of us, we live a much, much more comfortable life, regardless of which socio-economic group we belong to, what is our education, regardless of everything. Our lives are far more comfortable than our grandparents' lives, right? Everybody's life. There is electricity, there is mass transport, there are roads. Today we are sitting in a pavilion of this size, which is fully AC. 30 years ago, we would not have been able to have AC and we would be sweating in the Kerala weather. So yes, comfort has increased in everybody's life, but the other part is also equally true. In that same proportion, directly proportionally, happiness is decreased because the pursuit is now more towards material things, more towards material pleasures, and more towards, I want everything and I want it now kind of attitude. So that is where Gurudev's idea of a cultured individual comes into being. Another very witty quote, Gurudev says that what is a cultured person, what is an uncultured person? So it's a lovely definition. He says a cultured person spreads happiness wherever he goes, and an uncultured person spreads happiness whenever he goes. So uncultured person goes from a situation, there is happiness there, but a cultured person enters a situation and he brings happiness there, he or she brings happiness there. So when we're talking about culture, Gurudev means that we need to have this holistic development of our own personalities and not just run behind material pleasures, but understand what truly gives us happiness. Interestingly, what Gurudev spoke about based on our ancient wisdom is pretty much the same thing that the best universities in the world and the best psychologists who are researching happiness are coming back to the same things. So there is this huge study, Harvard study on happiness, which has been going on for the past some 40 years or something like that. They've been tracking people across generations. And the things that they have found are the same things that our ancient wisdom has been telling us, which is you need to have a strong community bonding. You need to have some kind of spiritual anchor to your life. You need to live in they call it a multi-generational household. For us, it's just an extended joint family. And you need to find a purpose. is what all the Yale is saying that, Harvard is saying that. Not that we should believe it because they're saying it, but there are a lot of Indians who do, so that is why I have to save it. But all of this has already been talked about in our Shastras, and that is why when Gurudev says that we live in this strange paradox of an era where our happiness is decreasing, but our comforts are increasing, our focus should be to equip ourselves with culture so that we rediscover happiness, we discover the pursuit of happiness more than our pursuit of material comforts.
Thank you, Shefali ji. Yeah. And finally, a question on connecting culture to present-day generation. Ramesh ji, being a long-time member of Chinmaya family, one of the Gurudev's lasting contributions has been initiatives like Balavihar and Chik. So, could you share how these platforms help shape cultural identity, confidence, and a sense of belonging among children and youth today?
Yeah, thank you. So this is another topic quite close to my heart. And if you don't mind, I will share this personal story because really speaking, when we talk about Balavihar, when we talk about Chik, my daughter was born in the same year I met with Puji Gurudev, Janaki. And Gurudev told us, three of us, to start the study classes at that time. So I used to have, 10, 15 people sitting at my home in Nairobi in Kenya, and we used to hold these classes. And this 2-year-old girl would come and sit next to me, very quiet. She has always been a quiet person. And she would come and sit next to me. She would be listening as if, I'm listening to something. There is something going on here. And she was continuously sitting next to me and, all through the class. And sometimes she would go to Mummy's lap and sit there as well, because Mummy was also part of the class as well. So that child, when my wife started the Balavihar classes in Nairobi, all my 4 children actually went to Balavihar classes. And the teaching which was given, as we know that Balavihar is where children from the age of 4 right up to, 11, 12 years, 15 years, they go through this whole teaching. And there is a wonderful structured way of teaching the children as well. And this is mainly done through storytelling. And again, I come back to my original proposition. It is all about inner transformation. So that if I just can kind of reframe it in a slightly different way, the civilization may help us to master the outer world. Culture helps us to master the inner world. It transforms Prakriti, our natural tendencies, and prevents them from falling into Vikriti. And by guiding them towards Sanskriti, which is refinement. And this is the whole process of Balavihar. This is the whole process of Chik. And the teaching which is done in a very systematic way, taking into account the child's age, their cognitive development at that stage, taking into account the various kind of emotional development of the child, taking all that into account, it is now systematically taught every week. Balavihar classes are taking place, Chik classes are taking place. And just like we saw the presentation on the first day about in the Balavihar in the States, how many people are attending Balavihar? There is something which brings them there. And the people begin to recognize that, this Western culture, we are living as a diaspora in a Western culture which is so invasive in our minds and in our hearts. And to protect and to build that defense against it, so that we don't lose this Sanskriti. This is why Gurudev created this Balavihar and Chiks. And not only to do that, but to give them the values which, through storytelling, they become imbibed in that. Now that three-year-old girl who was attending Balavihar throughout, the time she was there, we came to the UK. Again, Chinmaya Mission was there for us. Family is always, where you go, Chinmaya Mission family is there always for you. This is one of the beauties of what Gurudev has created for us. Even if I go to a remote place in, America, I know somewhere I'll find Balavihar. So what it means is that when I came to the UK and the family came back to the UK, then again the whole kind of Balavihar started, and Janaki kind of grew up. She went to university. She did a degree in politics, international relations at Warwick University, and she got a first class. Very bright, very scholarly. Then she said, Mom and Dad, I want to take 1 year gap here. And I want to go to India, and I want to go to this youth empowerment program, this 1 year program. When she came back, she already had a place at London School of Economics, one of the top institutions in the world, to do a master's degree. After 3 weeks of going to London School of Economics, she rang me. She says, Dad, I don't think this is for me. I don't think this is for me. My heart is somewhere else. And she knew that the course at Sandipani had already started. And she says, I want to go and do the 2-year Vedanta course. And she went. We had a lot of discussion. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? She was very sure. We consulted Guruji and Swamiji. All of them said, let her come. If she wants to go back and to London School of Economics, she will go back. Today, she is Brahmachari Sri Priya Chaitanya, who is in charge of the UK mission. And if you listen to that child of Pujya Gurudev, see the clarity of her thinking, see the clarity of expression, see how she behaves with everybody. Everybody just loves her in the UK. Wherever she goes, and this 75 years, she's been traveling throughout the UK. And every place she goes, she makes a difference to somebody's life. If you want to see a living example of Balavihar Enchik and what Gurudev has given us this gift to our children, this is the gift and the expression of that gift in terms of this child of mine, which is a gift for this whole family, but it is also a gift to the world.
Thank you so much. I think the field of expertise of our panel members, I think it has added 3 dimensions to the culture terminology as it is. The short of time, we would like to hear again and again, but I think we have to stop here. One single note from me, culture remains alive only when knowledge deepens, understanding the values, shaping the life. So this idea is beautifully captured in the education vision of our Chinmaya mission as well as our Chinmaya Vidyapeeth. Knowledge protects culture forever and cultured people share abundantly. On that note, we would like to wind up this profound discussion. Thank you so much.